Hello, students, and welcome to another episode of College Prep World History. I'm Mr. Willis. On behalf of our World History staff, Mr. Gordon, Ms. Pancini, and Ms. Atwood, I am going to bring you an episode on the beginnings of our study of World War II in the Eastern European and Mediterranean fronts, where battles are taking place that are maybe not as well known as some of the battles in France and the Battle of Britain, which was my last lecture. So we're going to go to North Africa, is the area that I'm going to be focusing on here in just a moment. And in a successive video, Mr. Gordon will be focusing on Operation Barbarossa, which is the invasion of Russia by the Germans. So let's go ahead and go into our lecture here on North Africa. First, I want to go ahead and show you guys really quickly technology, how technology is important in World War II. And this slide shows you the USS Ranger, and the USS Ranger CV-4 is the first United States naval vessel built as a carrier. It more than anything else kind of shows you the importance of this emerging technology during World War II. The carrier in the 1930s is a brand new invention, something that is going to be monumentally important to the success of the United States during World War II. And so while the USS Ranger may not be necessarily something that we're going to test you on, it's really important to note that technology and emerging technology during World War II will play a huge role in the success of the military forces on both sides. And you see this in particular with Hitler during Blitzkrieg and Lightning War, the use of tanks, the use of the Luftwaffe and bombers and artillery from ships. It's all really monumentally important to the ultimate success of a military. And so all I'm going to do here is show you really briefly a video on the USS Ranger and kind of how it's christened into the Navy. It's a silent video. I'll just go ahead and show it to you guys. Kind of cool how all this goes and takes place. In case you have never seen a ship christened before, they're going to take a bottle of champagne and hit it on the end of the ship, and it's going to fall into the water. So pretty cool how this all takes place. So here's the video. Okay, students, so as you guys can see with the technology piece, the Navy is going to be very, very important for the United States as they enter the war here in 1942 after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which again we'll get into in some later lessons. But the Navy will be really important for the United States as we move forward, especially these carriers that you're going to see in some of our videos later on. So now we're going to talk a little bit about North Africa and the importance of North Africa in the grand scheme of World War II. And there's one acquisitional holding, there's one land mass or one piece of land in the Mediterranean, Middle East that is going to be vitally important to the success of the war effort, and that's the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is this series of man-made canals that connects the Mediterranean essentially to the Indian Ocean. So it's a shortcut between Europe and the Indian Ocean. So rather than having to go all the way around the Cape of Good Hope and the southern tip of Africa, it's really important that one side or the other holds Egypt, the area of Egypt, and holds control of the Suez Canal, because then military vessels and the navies can pass through these areas and be protected by the Suez Canal. So as you can see in this video or in this slide, the Italians were really tasked with trying to attack the Allies' forces in Egypt. Egypt was under the control of the British at the time, and so the Italians are going to be tasked with taking care of this while Hitler takes care of the attacks on France and Britain. Well, the Italians are not going to be very successful in countering the power of the British in North Africa, especially with the British holding some of the greatest advantages in tank warfare in North Africa. And initially, the British are going to be very successful in North Africa, attacking the areas of Libya and further westward from Egypt, and preventing the Italians from capturing the Suez Canal. So, in other words, it's going to be up to somebody else other than the Italians, due to the weakness of the Italians, to try to conquer Egypt. And so that's going to lead us into our next point here, which is that if the Italians are not going to be able to do it because they lose 135,000 prisoners in that attack, it's going to have to be the Germans. So on this slide here, very important that you note, in North Africa, the ultimate goal for the Axis powers is to seize Egypt and control the Suez Canal. So make sure you write down Axis powers' goal is to seize Egypt and control of the Suez Canal. And so this leads Adolf Hitler to send one of his most important commanders to North Africa to try to take advantage of this goal. So in February of 1941, the British are going to capture 135,000 Italians. This leads to Hitler bringing in his what he would call his ace in the hole, or what we would call an ace in the hole. It's General Erwin Rommel. So make sure you write down Erwin Rommel, all right? And he's known as the Desert Fox. Write down General Erwin Rommel, Desert Fox. You need to know him for the exam for World War II. He's brought in by Hitler to help out Mussolini because Mussolini cannot get the job done here. And so he's the commander of a very elite tank corps for the Germans. It's called the Afrika Korps. And you guys will notice, so write down Afrika Korps, all right? And you'll notice in those terms, Afrika Korps, normally in English, we would see Africa with a C, all right? And in Corps, we would see Corps with a C, but in this case, we see it with a K, all right? Just so you guys know, the term KKK, Ku Klux Klan, K's instead of C's, all right? You take it for what it's worth, all right? We know that that the Nazis believe in the Aryan race and the superiority of white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. So Afrika Korps, there's no coincidence that these are Ks. All right, so make sure that you guys write down General Erwin Rommel, Desert Fox, Afrika Korps, and those are that's Africa and Corps with Ks rather than Cs. So what's the ultimate goal, or what's the ultimate result? I'm sorry, of the attack of the Germans and Erwin Rommel against the British in this Northern African campaign. And again, remember, this is prior to the entrance of the United States into the war, and this is going to be immediately preceding the attack on Pearl Harbor. Well, those gains that the British had in North Africa, those 500 miles that they had taken, 135,000 prisoners, right? Those territorial gains are going to be taken back by Rommel. And so it's going to lead to what we call the Siege of Tobruk. And Tobruk, just like Dunkirk when we saw the movie, Tobruk is a port city on the Mediterranean, the northern African port city in Libya. And there's going to be a siege. There's going to be a siege of Tobruk for 241 days. This lasts all the way into November of 1941, that the Allied forces will end up being victorious in, but it's going to lead to a great cost for the British. This is really a massive strain on their military forces. They are really the only ones at this point that are continuing to successfully fend off the Germans and the Italians in World War II. The British are going to need some sort of help along these lines in order to be successful, ultimately win out in World War II. And so it's just very, very in sync here, where the Japanese eventually are going to attack the United States here in December, and this very next month, we're going to see the United States start to mobilize its military forces to help out the Allies in World War II. All right, so what you need to write down on this slide, the result in North Africa, is you need to write down the Siege of Tobruk. All right, so Allies win the Siege of Tobruk in November of 1941. That's what you want to write down. And again, we're seeing, like, in this great concept that it's kind of like a back and forth or a teeter-totter, where the British are going to be successful, then the Germans are going to be successful, and there's no real, overall victory between the two. But a stalemate at this point is a victory for the Allies, because the Germans are the ones that are on the offensive in World War II. All right, so our final slide for today is going to be the war in the Balkans, and you might remember the term the Balkans from World War I. This is the area where World War I began, where we had the story about Gavrilo Princip and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Well, Hitler is going to take advantage again of the Allied weakness in this area, and he's going to invade other territories, just like he did prior to the beginning of World War II. He's going to invade other territories in Eastern Europe prior to his ultimate goal, which is Operation Barbarossa. He wants to create some launching points for his attacks on the Soviet Union through Operation Barbarossa by conquering these Eastern European territories. And so what you need to write down here is, when you write down war in the Balkans, write down Hitler invades Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Yugoslavia, and Greece, and this is all in 1941. So all these territories are conquered prior to U.S. entrance into World War II. So you can imagine, at this point, Hitler and the Axis powers basically control all of Europe. They've conquered Poland. They've conquered all these smaller territories in Eastern Europe. They've invaded France, and they control Paris. They've forced the Allied forces back across the English Channel into England. Spain has a sympathetic ruler towards Hitler, even though he's not officially in the war. He has a sympathetic ruler in Francisco Franco in Spain. So all these territories in continental Europe belonged to the Axis powers. They have successfully, just like Napoleon, they have successfully conquered all of Europe, and what they have left are either Britain and the Soviet Union, just like Napoleon had Britain and Russia that he had to invade. Those are the only remaining territories left that need to be conquered for him to ultimately control all of Eurasia as well as the British Isles. So it's really important that we kind of note how close Adolf Hitler is to winning this war by the time we reach November of 1941. He just needs to conquer Britain and Russia at this point. That's it. That's it. Right? So he's ultimately really close, and it's it's unfortunate for the Americans with Pearl Harbor, but it's very fortunate for the Allies that the United States enters World War II when it does, because this gives such a big boost to the Allied forces in their fight against Adolf Hitler. So that's our presentation for today, and on behalf of our World History team, I am Mr. Willis. We will see you next time with Operation Barbarossa.